7 of Walk, Talk, and Brock. We have reached the end of the school year just about, which is kind of crazy, honestly. It feels like I was just filming the first one here with Michaela, but today I have our news editor, Angelina, with us. Say hello, Angelina. Introduce yourself to the world.
Hello, my name's Angelina. I'm the news editor here at Brock Press. Very excited for this podcast.
And I'm excited to have you here because you have some pretty interesting news articles you've been writing this year. We've also got Andrea here off camera. Put your hand in and wave. There you go. So, all right, Angelina, why don't we kick it off with something kind of serious? You've written a lot about Doug Ford. All right, when I go on your page on the website, I see his face like at least 3 times right away, like just in the thumbnails. So I guess I'll start by asking, what's the deal?
Doug Ford, I mean, what isn't he doing? I feel like he's, especially with universities right now and for like university students, I think the one that I've been very focused on with recent news of like all the changes he's making to OSAP is how he's been cutting post-secondary funding. I got to go to both of the OSAP rallies on the 4th and the 24th, which they were both very cool. I've been basically writing about the new cuts he's been making to OSAP, changing the grants from 85% to 25%, and lifting the tuition freeze. So initially, my interest just started with reporting on those changes that he made, and then going out to the rallies to sort of see everybody's the students and their opinions and like what they wanted to say to him. The rallies were hosted by Canadian Federation of Students Ontario, and they did, I'd say they did like a really good job with all of the guests they brought on, and there were a lot of different organizations there too. There was a lot of like solidarity within everyone, and all the people there were very like open to have a conversation, and I got to do a lot of like nice interviews with everyone there. So that, and then going from like the rallies and all of the new stuff, I was sort of curious. The most recent article, I think, like as of right now, is my Doug Ford 50 years of underfunding education one, which sort of it starts with Doug Ford and ends on Doug Ford, but it sort of just goes through the entire like history of post-secondary education from like 1977 to 2026 with the new recent changes. Sort of just discussing how we're in the position we're in right now, where everything is so underfunded. My like idea for that article came after for one of Ford's interviews to sort of justify why he's making these changes. He said it's because of the federal caps to international students, which they did earlier, or which they did in 2025 and 2024. But because of that, I'm sure we've all felt it, like in post-secondary institutions where there's been a lot of cuts, hiring freezes, layoffs, like seminar room available, and just less resources in general. So that's sort of what he's attributing all of his changes to, saying that post-secondary funding is needed for education. So then, just out of curiosity is sort of where it started, where I kind of just got really into looking at the entire history of post-secondary education in Ontario, and starting from 1977, that's when they first introduced differential fees for international students, and that essentially just allowed it for the first time in Canadian history. It started in Ontario. National students were allowed to be charged a different tuition from domestic students,
Right.
and then in 1995, they introduced the deregulation fee, which essentially allowed for each university, and then I think even each program around that same time, where they could charge their own fee based on university and based on program, while simultaneously the provincial government was like continuously underfunding education. So because post-secondary institutions weren't really getting any funding, they started looking over and they were like, if we can charge whatever we want and we know we can charge international fees more, that's sort of where they started making all of their funding from. And we saw this really start to get into use after the recession in 2008, and then starting from like 2010 is when you get the data based on like domestic versus international students. And from 2010 to 2024/5, that's the most recent data. I talk about in the article how we've gone from the provincial government making up, I think, about like 52% of post-secondary funding to less than 30-ish%, somewhere around there. And then for international students, I want to say they were like less than like 5% of the data was from their funding. Now by 2024, they make over a third. So
Yeah.
the like numbers got essentially flipped between the two, and it shows how. And then where Ford comes into play for all of this was when he came into office in 2018. He just started putting a bunch of different changes where it made, because 2018, 2019 is where we see like the biggest jump of international enrollment in post-secondary education, and it's where he started making most of his cuts. So, like taking away the main branches of funding that post-secondary institutions could make from it. So, and also taking away resources like the low income, like free tuition for low income students, and that. So since he's been here, he sort of came into it when there was already an issue, but all he's done is made the issue worse. Yeah. So like after COVID, especially because well everywhere in Canada's economy, like we're still seeing the effects of COVID, and especially on post-secondary education, it also took a hit. So of course the solution from the federal government, provincial government, and institutions was to bring in more international students. They brought in, I think in 2023 and 2024 together, they brought in almost 400,000 international students just between those 2 years, where like prior to 2019 there was always like less than 100,000 every year, and then in 2 years they brought almost 400,000. So it was a big jump to sort of just keeping institutions afloat after COVID was mainly because of the international students they brought in. That's how post-secondary institutions sort of made it out of all of the out of like post-COVID economy. But then, I mean, Canada being Canada and politicians never being able to just come up with a straight story and talk about their own policies, they decided to scapegoat those same international students. Yeah. Which then, now we're at 2025 where we're putting a cap on the permits, and then Doug Ford's coming back and saying it's the federal government's fault, when prior to it was international students' fault, but it's everyone's fault except the government's. So
Except the government. That's how it goes. A tale as old as time.
Yeah.
Now you're clearly very, very well researched on this. Is this something you were already looking into before you started writing these articles, or was this all research that you did when preparing these articles?
Partially. I sort of knew, like, I knew the main like gist of why, like I knew that Ontario was exploiting international students, and like that they were making most of the funding, like I said, like a third of it. I knew all of those datas, but looking back like from 1977 and really going into all of that data, that was what I did for the article. The internet has so much information, but like I never realized how much of the data was just so available for us to see. Like all of the funding from I think I used from 2000 to 2024 or 2025. It's all available, like broken down into categories and all of that. I forget the exact site. It's also in the article, but that, and then using like the inflation calculator from Bank of Canada. I think this is probably the article I did the most research on ever. I have like an entire Excel sheet of just numbers and me like breaking them down. Yeah, it was, I had a lot of fun with it though, but
that's awesome.
I think this is definitely one that I've done the most research for. One of the coolest things I found, like while doing the research, which isn't necessarily related to the article, but everything I said about differential fees in 1977, the only place where I found, I guess, like, I don't know if it would be primary source data, but just the most relevant data like of that time, not just somebody telling back on it, was from an article in the Queen's Journal, where a student journalist had reported on this being the announcement of it and sort of going through the developments of it, which there's no other news archives that, at least that I could find, where this was maintained. And even in like Ontario's own like provincial policies and that, they briefly mentioned that this happened in 1977, but they don't, and I think it's, what's it called, like the Hansker, like where they sort of the recap of all of like Ontario legislation where they're talking about it. The time when it was announced is not in any of those information. The only place where it's sort of been preserved for news is through student journalism from the Queen's Journal, which I thought was really cool. And it was like written 50 years ago by students just like us. So
yeah.
I thought that was really
I've got a piece right back here, this one here. I was actually just looking at it before we started filming. It's volume 1, issue 1, back when we were just Badger. I think it was Badger, and then I think it was Press for a while, which is a flawed name because what kind of a name is just Press? And now obviously we're the Brock Press. I think we were the Brock Badger for a while too. Yeah, forgive me, I'm not the most well versed on every single name change we've gone through. So, but yeah, that's great to see that students were already reporting on it, and that we can rely on their research to fuel our own. Speaking of students, you got to speak to quite a few students at the 2 rallies that you attended, right? If you had to, like, I know this is a really almost impossible question. If you'd like ballpark estimate how many people, just based on like what
So
you saw. I know this might not be accurate at all, but like just what you saw. If you had to like guess a number each, how many people?
I don't know. So at the rallies, it was really nice to see because there was like a mix of students, community members, and a lot of different organizations. So like students specifically, I'm not sure, but for the overall organization, I got to talk to Omar Musa, who's I want to say he's the representative, like national representative for CFSO. I got to talk to him afterwards from the rally, and he was telling me that it was for the first rally on March 4th. There was over 4,000 people who were at the rally, and
Wow.
you could like tell like the crowd was very energetic the whole time,
Mhm.
and you could like clearly tell that everybody was very passionate to be there. And then the second rally, this one is more of a guesstimate, and I haven't gotten exact numbers, but I think it was around 2,000.
Wow.
So people
Nice.
were showing up for it.
Great. And I'm guessing it was primarily students, like
Yes.
either high school or post-secondary students attending this.
Yes, this in the second rally, I saw a lot more high school students.
Okay.
I actually got
Well, it
to
makes
talk
sense.
to, yeah, I got
Yeah.
to talk to one of the high school students too, and there was a passion to be out there and sort of start like advocating and stuff, which was really cool to see. And then I think there was also a lot of overlap between students and like being part of movements. So like a lot of students who were sort of in separate movements outside of school were also there.
I
Yeah.
feel really bad for post-secondary students who have to like complete their education, but also for like high school students especially. I have a friend whose younger brother is just leaving high school, and he's like, he leaves, and then all of a sudden this change happens, and it's like he and his class is like screwed. All of his older siblings got to go and benefit from, grants from OSAP, and now it's been so significantly reduced. It's like, why as soon as I'm leaving high school, do all these changes have to be made? So that it's definitely terrible to see. It's such a substantial change too.
Yeah, that's
What about-
essentially what like all of the high school students I was talking to there were saying, especially right now. Like, I mean, it's been a while since I've been in grade 12, but I remember like how stressful this time was specifically, and also like trying to find the motivation because you're so
Yeah.
close to finishing, but there's still like the like big chunk left. And with all of that, they don't even, and they're starting to get their university acceptances too. But he was saying like so many of his friends don't even know if they can afford to go,
Yeah.
himself included. And they were just talking about how uncertain their future is with all the OSAP changes and just everything happening in the world. So like, it's definitely unfair.
Well, and we live in a world where so many of the higher paying jobs require a post-secondary degree. You know what I mean? Not necessarily. You don't need a post-secondary degree to make a lot of money, but it's definitely very, very helpful. So I feel like if you've got people who come from, a poorer family or whatever, they can't afford to send their kids to university, then those kids are less likely to get high-paying jobs, and the cycle just kind of repeats itself, right? Like I don't know, what's it called, a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like, it's terrible to see people having those doors closed off for them, completely out of their control. Yeah. Especially as a future educator myself, it's going to be hard to see more students that just can't afford it. Like, I'll be teaching high school, so, I mean, hopefully by the time I'm teaching, I hope that these changes have been reversed, that change has happened. I'm hopeful for that, but if not, I mean, that's gonna be terrible to see people who are turned away from their dreams because of something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Even like people in post-secondary too, a lot of people I've talked to were talking about, like at the rallies, they were talking about how they don't know if they can come back in the next school year or like come back for another semester because they just don't know if they can afford it with
Yeah.
all of the changes. And just even like with just being so loan dependent, it's just like, do I want an education? And be like in debt for who knows how many years?
However many years, yeah.
Yeah. Just,
It's definitely something. I know something needs to change with this whole thing because this is unsustainable for people. Is there anything else you want to share about being at those rallies? Any stories that you have or things that you saw that might be of interest?
I mean, I think like with one of the aspects of the rally where I think the biggest difference that I saw and like felt between the March 4th and the March 24th rally was the increase in police force that was there,
Oh,
which
right.
like it felt like an intimidation tactic almost. But the March 4th rally ended more abruptly because people were vandalizing one of the statues in front of the Legislative Assembly. So that then led to police entering and arresting the individual who did these vandalism, and then it also turned into police just using brute force and just pure like aggression, which of course like police are under stress and that, but there's so many videos online where you can just see polices, and this is also in the article I wrote about it, but it's like the link to those videos where they're walking past and unprompted they're like shoving students and like going, and then somebody's coming after them like, hey, why are you shoving, and then now they're shoving them again. There's one where like a police officer takes another student's skateboard and like fully hits another student with it. And then there was also, I think I was there on March 4th, and like when I counted, I think there was about like 100 or so that I counted of just making like a little barricade in front of the assembly. So that's where March 4th ended off. And then coming back on the 24th, which also for context, at the beginning of the March 4th protest, there was about 3 police officers altogether in the entire park. The second you come out of Queen's Park Station for the 24th, it was just police cars like surrounding the entire park. Every single like corner of the park was just police cars, and then they had, right at the edge of the park, they had barricades up, and all of the statues they had covered, which I guess that one makes sense, but it was just, and was, fair enough. But and then there was like dozens of police officers from the beginning, just between the students or actually they call themselves peace officers, which I don't fully understand what their role is. I've been wanting to go and look into this, but they're called peace officers. They all have guns. I don't really know what this idea of peace is.
It's a little, little contradictory there, maybe. Not quite the image I would have thought of.
But and then I was talking to a lot of people at the protest about how they felt about like the increase in police presence, and they were all just reporting like how they felt. It just felt very like an intimidation scheme almost, like trying to intimidate students. And this time was different between like March 4th and March 24th. This time legislation had opened again because they were on break during March 4th, so that could also be a reason for the increased security. But it just felt like they were trying to scare students away from even entering. There was also like drones circling around, which was, but on a more like better note, Merritt Stiles also came to the March 24th protest, the leader of the opposition and the current Ontario NDP leader, and she's been talking about how she's planning to call for another vote for reverse all of these changes. And she was discussing how to sort of reach out to your if your MPP are conservatives, how to reach out to them, email them, and she was sort of discussing that part on like how changes could happen inside of legislation. So that was a slightly, I guess, more of like an upside to it. But the police force was
leaders coming out, to support it. Yeah. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you covering those 2 rallies and this whole story, which affects students so significantly. Thank you for that. And I'm sure a lot of people appreciate your coverage on that because it is such an important thing for us to be talking about. I want to shift gears a little bit. You have written some, I think, opinion pieces, or was it analysis? It's been a little while.
They were opinion pieces,
Okay. You've written some opinion pieces on the patriarchy, and I'd love to ask you about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 3 articles that are coming to mind for me. One of them, I think they'll be out by the time this comes out or sooner. One of them is a feature piece I got to do like a while back. I think it's like Performative Male is the New Gay, and then
that was an excellent feature.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun writing that one.
that was a very, very good feature. Anyway, sorry, go on.
So good. And then the second one is more recent, where I sort of just talk about Gen Z dating and this whole idea of like the loneliness pandemic, and sort of just talking about how a lot of the times what we attribute to like almost like a Gen Z moral crisis of like, oh, nobody can commit, everybody's like, Gen Z is just so bad at relationships. A lot of the times it's just, I feel like, in my opinion, obviously, like a natural progression of what happens when marriage is no longer like a necessity for people to just exist, and it's more of a choice. Like if you want to get married or not is simply a choice. So the entire article, I sort of just go into whether it's marriage and romance, like romantic relationships are sustainable based on just intimacy, or whether there needs to be this like necessity component to it, which in my opinion, I think that's the reason why we're seeing Gen Z not marrying as much anymore, lower birth rates, and just not getting into as many relationships. Of course, there's like a lot of like modern dating flaws, online dating for one. But like, I think there's also a big component to it, which is just people not wanting to settle, and like people not wanting to sort of just compromise things that they find essential to them simply to be in a relationship, because there's no more like of a financial necessity for it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what that article discusses. And then the one that I'm in the process of writing right now, I'm looking into the patriarchy and attraction. This was inspired by Michaela's article, which she wrote recently about I think about like lip fillers and Botox and the increase of cosmetic surgeries or just cosmetic treatments, and how they're all derived from the patriarchy. And she had a specific line in there where she says that a lot of these things that feel like our own personal choices are just derivatives of the patriarchy, and how like deeply entrenched it is into our psyche. And that's something I've been thinking about for a while. And after her article specifically, I was thinking about how much this goes into attraction. Like, the article's still being written and researched, but my main idea is a lot of the things that I think like go into conventionally attractive in like heteronormative relationships is this. I feel like a lot of beauty standards for women revolves around just being small, and then for men revolves around like being bigger, and it sort of, I feel like it just always feeds into this like inferiority, superiority complex almost, where it's like men like provider, taller, bigger, and then women have to be all petite and tiny and like little princess. So it's just a lot of the times I feel like what we think are just our natural attraction, because I feel like attraction is one of those things where people are always like, oh, it's just my preference, like why can't I have it? And of course you can. I'm not telling you like who to be attracted to, but it's just, I think it's a cool thing to sort of just self-reflect on why you find certain traits attractive, and sort of how society might have molded
Where's that come from?
Like where's all of that coming from? So that's what that one's about. And then to go back to the feature piece, this was, I think, maybe like one of my favorite articles I've written today. I just had so much fun. I was on a trip.
This is one that I when I read this, I was like, that is a particularly good feature.
Thank you. I was on a trip visiting my cousins, and I remember just like sitting in the airport and just almost like ranting, and then like making sure my rants weren't like reading other articles and stuff, and then like ranting away just in the airport made my what's it called, my transit go by very fast. Nice. But the article, that one sort of came about from just so much online discourse, which I think it's died down a little bit now, but so much online discourse about like the performative male. And what I saw was like a lot of women just feeling frustrated with men sort of putting on this act to try and get them, like acting like they like a certain type of music or certain style, certain aesthetics. And it started with women sort of being frustrated about that on the internet. And where the root like word of performative male even comes from is through like academic writings, where they discuss men who do those things, where they act interested in women's interests and they play this part, but then when it comes to actual activism, they don't actually partake in it. So the original root of the word sort of started as this critique, but what I saw on the internet was just anything that a man did that was like a little bit that like shifted a little bit outside of what's thought of as normal, like matcha apparently is the most feminine thing ever.
Really?
Started being labeled as performative. Really? And I think this was like my favorite part about writing the feature was it like bothered me so much, this entire discourse, but while writing it, I want to say it was Judith Butler. I hope I'm not misremembering that, but it was her piece about performance in gender, and it spelled out exactly what I was thinking, and she wrote it so perfectly, where it's like any sort of act of gender is a performance. And to say that like the guy who's reciting poetry and drinking matcha and, you know, with his tote bag is putting on a performance any more than the guy who's there every Sunday with his beer, watching football, screaming at his TV, it just further perpetuates these harmful stereotypes and like misogyny. I feel like it all just comes back rooted into misogyny, where the idea isn't necessarily that the performative man isn't performing, but just any sort of gender expression is a performance for both men and women. And a lot of the times it just felt like people were just almost uncomfortable with these men, even if it was just for performance and just to get people's attention, which I feel like can also be applied to, like I said, the guy who's watching football and like screaming at Sunday afternoon with his beer, or just doing construction, like lifting all the heavy things and, you know, acting all manly. It's like both of those are performances that men are putting on for other people, and women do it too. So it's just every sort of act of gender is a performance, and to be so fixated on this one group of people who are acting in more feminine ways it just felt so much like how conversations would go in like 2000s about like, oh, that's so gay. Like it just, to me,
Yeah.
it just started sounding the exact same. So that was starting to really frustrate me. And then because of this, I got to like write all my frustration down in an
Yeah.
airport. So that was, yeah.
Great. Yeah, no, I thought that was a very insightful piece, and I'd never thought of that. I've definitely heard performative male or performative man thrown around. You're right, not as much like since the turn of the new year, maybe.
Yeah,
Because
it's
online
definitely good.
lingo moves very quick. I've heard less 6-7 lately. I don't, is that on the way out?
I think so.
Okay. God, I hope so. It's a really good piece, and one of my, maybe my favorite article of yours this year.
Mine too, I think.
Okay, now speaking of favorite articles, you gotta, I just want to take a moment to appreciate how good I've become at like segueing through topics. Where I'm like,
Even
you leave it, and it's like the next topic. I want to give myself a pat on the back for that. Speaking of favorite articles, see, we're gonna move into talking about your favorite articles of yours. We talked a little bit about this before, so I've given you a little bit of time to prepare. I do not know what your answers are going to be. Your top 5 articles that you have written, in your opinion, this school year, whether that's the one you're most proud of, or you just think they're the best written, or they've been the most fun to write. You can kind of use whatever metric you want. I'm not gonna fact check. I trust you to pick your own favorites. So, do you want to kick us off with your 5th favorite Anjelina article of the school year, of this top 5 list?
okay, the one I have here is it's titled "USA Not Fascist, Just Anti-Antifa," which is an article like one of quite a few that I've written about the current American administration. Well, that one was both a little scary to write, and I had a lot of fun writing it, where my inspiration for it came after the government under President Donald Trump in the US, they announced that they were signing a new executive order basically announcing that Antifa, which stands for anti-fascism, like the movement itself as a terrorist group, which in and of itself, that executive order, just there's so much room for error in that order because it's a movement, not necessarily an organization. There's not X amount of people in it. There's like, it's just people who are opposed to fascism and sort of fight against things that they believe are fascist. So after that executive order came out, I'd been following American politics up until that point. So after it came out, I started really looking into it. And I'm sure like we've all seen the discourse of people, at least like my algorithm loves to do this, where like comparing America with Germany in the 19th, like with Hitler, like Trump with Hitler or Mussolini. Right. And I wanted to really look into that, but not necessarily where it was like at the peak of Hitler's rule, like not in the middle of the war during the Holocaust where he was completely taken over, but before that, sort of to see how that rise came about. And what I found was there were a lot of parallels with 1930s Germany and the 2020s in America. So that's sort of what the article touches on. And I think like there's a lot of parallels there, but I think one of the ones that I thought was, it almost feels like a playbook, this one, and it's like my new favorite fun fact to tell people. But the way that the Trump administration reacted to the shooting of Charlie Kirk in September, which also this Antifa executive order also came out like after the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and they cited that as one of the reasons why this is necessary. They really tried to make Charlie Kirk into like a martyr, which regardless of like how you feel about Charlie Kirk or like his death, it's just, he's not a political figure. And the way they went about it was though it was a political assassination. And this was a very similar to how in the 1930s, I'm forgetting the name, but there was, I think it was a general under Hitler who was also murdered, and they said that he was murdered by the communists at the time. And the way that the like Nazis and Hitler sort of made that entire narrative about this general, and also try to mythologize him almost, talking about how it's these communists are doing it, they're a threat to our society. The dialogue and the dialogue for how they discussed that and how the right in America was talking about Charlie Kirk and the left was so, like, they parallel each other like freakishly, but I think it's just little things like that of how they're trying to change the narrative and paint this picture of it that sort of shows us like the stepping stones as to how you get to a complete like fascist state as Germany became, because it's not like one day people in Germany woke up and then, oh, we are now under fascism.
Right.
There were like little steps and pebbles
There's a
placed.
descent.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, and America's taking a very similar steps to that. So
Interesting. And that is USA Not Fascist, just Anti-Fascism, which I think is a phenomenal title. Actually, I really like that. Okay, so that is 5th place. I see why. It's very, very interesting. In 4th place, a little bit even better than that, in your opinion.
number 4 takes a little bit of a turn. Actually,
Okay.
well, yeah, but it's not out yet. It'll be out on April 1st. It's the crass article I wrote this past week about. It's gonna be called "Unplugging from the Matrix." Nothing says alpha like a good boy, and it's.
Sorry,
have-
I'll let you talk. But I loved it.
the pleasure, the privilege of interviewing Andrew Barkley, who's your local dog, and he's just very passionate about this new rise of passive dogs in the community. Nobody really wants to be a dog anymore. Everybody's forgetting their wolf roots, and he's just advocating for all of his fellow doggos to come back and be like alpha dogs, make their relatives and their bloodline proud. His key issues that he talks about is all of these new exotic pets that they like to call and they keep letting into their house. He calls it, he takes after a French bulldog who called it the Great Propounding Theory, and he just goes into how, we have to get all of these, this is him speaking obviously, how we have to get all these exotics out of our house and take back our title as man's best friend, how awful cats have become and the whole feline movement. And
Yeah.
it was yeah, so interviewing Barkley was very fun, and I just had a lot of fun
want to clarify for people who don't know what we're talking about right now. The Brock Crass is our April Fool's edition. We're filming this on March 31st, so by the time this goes out, it will already be up on the website for sure. So we write these sort of satire stories. So your interview with Barkley, it wasn't like a sit down and talk interview. It was more about
it was just me taking a little dig at the current red pill movement.
These are the doggos here.
Pop pill movement.
There you
And
go.
I would also say this article in no way reflects my actual take on dogs. Love dogs.
Good.
So sorry to associate them with the red pill movement. But yeah, I had a lot of fun writing that one. And just
I'm really glad
being
that
able
you
to-
enjoyed Crass so much this year.
Oh, so good. I've never had so much fun editing articles. Like, I was just laughing
Oh, yeah.
the entire time.
We used to do Crass decades ago, but in terms of like recent years, this is the 3rd, I think, Crass that we've done in a row. I'm not just saying this because I'm editor-in-chief now, but I do think this is the strongest lineup of Crass articles out of any year I've seen yet, so I'm really excited. Okay, enough waffling about Crass. Let's hear what your 3rd place pick is.
Okay. Back to a more serious term, but in late 2025, there was an event called Medicine as Resistance, where Dr. Lubani, who is he was a doctor, and he is a doctor, and he's worked in war zones before. He's been to Ukraine, and he had come to St. Catherine's at the Performing Arts, first Performing Arts Center in St. Catherine's, and he talked about his experiences in Gaza. I got to go to the event. It was very heavy, and like I found myself like crying throughout the event, and he was so clearly passionate about it, and it was such a cool like event. If anything like that happens again, I highly recommend like everyone to go. It was so informative, and it was such a good event. And so I got to write about his discussions during the event. Before the event had started, they had a little bit of an issue with the Canadian Israeli Jewish Association. So CIJA, they started putting a resistance to this event. They talked to the people at the Performing Arts Center talking about how this event was anti-Israel and it was anti-Semitic and it was going to harm Jewish and Israeli members of Ontario. So they were sort of going against it. So after CIJA had sort of made their complaints and their concerns known to First Performing Arts, then First Performing Arts reached out to Brock, and then they had a special constable come and reach out, and then I got to do a follow-up interview with Professor Tenulis, who's was one of the professors who helped host the event. And so I got to talk to him about sort of dealing with everything with Sija and trying to have events take place at Brock. And I also got to write about Dr. Lubani and his experiences in Gaza. And I think it's one of my more different articles. I feel like it was very cool to write about. So just being able to sort of intertwine both of those things, and especially recapturing the event itself with Dr. Lubani. And one of the like most key things that I remember from the event was he has 2 daughters, and they were also at the event too, and they're very young, and they were just walking around the stage, they were playing, and then they'd come to him every now and then, and yeah, and it was just so almost jarring, I feel like, to just see 2 little girls just playing and having fun. I don't know if jarring is the right word, but just playing and having fun as Dr. Lubani was discussing all of the horrors that the children in Palestine are going through, or that he saw them go through, and like constantly being bombarded even as he's in a hospital trying to help them. I remember him telling the story about like a dad coming in with 2 kids, and he had to tell the dad like one of your kids isn't going to make it, and as he's telling us this story, the 2 girls are just there playing, and they're coming up to him and saying dad, and it was just such a like showcase of just like geographical luck, because that's really the only thing differentiating these like children, like these 2 kids and their dad, and Dr. Lubani and his 2 girls. Like it's just such a clear depiction of like geographical luck, and just how just simply being born or living on a different part of the world can completely and drastically change your future. And he talks about so it was a great event, and I was really happy I got to cover that.
I'm really glad you covered it as well. It was very strong coverage, and I'm glad you got to experience that too. Okay, so we're gonna move now into your personal top 2 articles that you've written this year. So this is like S tier now. Well, we may already have been in S tier, but we're moving further into S tier. All right, let's see what you have for your second place pick.
I've already talked about both of these earlier in the interview.
Totally fine.
And this one is second place. It's been on my top for majority of the year. It very recently got demoted to second place, but it is the performative male article.
I thought that was going to be your number 1.
I know.
That locked in as your number 1.
Very recent change. In my mind, it was still my number 1, but I'm realizing here just before when I made my ranking, I put it as number 2. But I mean, I've talked about the article before. It was just so much fun to write. I feel like it really did feel cathartic in a way to just get all of like my anger of people's and their like social media discussions and all the like little comments, to just be able to put it all into use, and to read like other pieces on it, and of other people like discussing about performance and gender. I feel like I learned so much about like all the little things that were annoying me. I feel like I learned so much better like how to verbalize why it was annoying me through this article. So that's definitely my second one. And then I can just go into my first one. Or
before you do, while our viewers are on the and myself are on the edge of our seats, Andrea's on the edge of her seat. She looks like she's gonna fall on the floor.
I'm invested.
She's invested. I just want to again remind everyone, I sound like a broken record at this point, that we do accept volunteer articles. We're at the end of the year now, just about, but if you have something you really, really want to write about, send it to volunteer@brockpress.com, and we will be happy to take a look and work with you. If you have a pitch that you want to send our way, we love volunteers. Also, you can read all these articles that we've talked about today, as well as so many other ones on our website, brockpress.com. So I hope you'll check that out when you're done watching this. But first, you have to stick around to see what Angelina's number one pick is. Okay, Angelina, I'm done waffling. Take us away with your top pick, best article of the year so far.
the best one, I think, and it's the most recent one too, so maybe I'm a little biased here, but it's the 50 years of underfunding and exploitation. Just looking back at post-secondary education in Ontario and from 1977 to 2026, I feel like I got to do so much research for that article and just really look into all of it, and I think it's maybe my most detailed article to date. And number 1 and number 5, I feel like they're both analysis pieces, which I love doing analysis pieces, but both of those articles is just me, like, I got to go so into, like, these topics that I'm already, like, I've always heard about, and I know, like, in a broader sense of what it was, and to be able to really go into it and see, like, where all of these issues are derived from and how we got to where we were. It was just really cool. And to also find all of these resources available, like, I'm like blanking on the exact links, but they're all in the article, I promise, and they're all cited. So it was just a really cool article to write. And this might be like recency bias though. So give me a month. Perform Demo might come back on top. But for now, I think.
Okay. For now, we'll leave this one on top. And I think it's deserving. The amount of research you put into this and how much of like your own knowledge that you already had going into this. Like I'm scrolling through it, the amount of numbers in this is like mind blowing. It's very well done. So be sure to check that out. I'm sure it'll be blown up on screen at this point. Right, Andrea? That's right. Okay. All right, Angelina, I think that's just about all of our time for this episode. Do you have anything else you want to share with our viewers before we wrap up?
No, I mean, this was really fun. I hope we get more volunteer articles. I love writing them. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun at the Rock Brass. I'm really happy I got to join this year. It's been really fun.
I'm really glad you did as well. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.